watching Inside Utah Politics.
A lot of questions being asked after a bill passed this year sets the separation of the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and the Unified Police Department in motion. For the latest on that, we turn to Salt Lake County Sheriff Rosie Rivera and Midvale Mayor Marcus Stevenson. Really appreciate both of you being here. We've had a lot of people asking about this, wanting to get some answers to questions. So I know it's a really fluid situation as we speak. A lot of things could change. But Sheriff, let's start with you. As we speak right now, what is the current situation?
Well, it's premature, but the current situation is that myself and the UPD board are working together to figure out what the impact of this legislation is going to be. We do know that it requires the sheriff to no longer be the CEO over Unified Police Department. So the sheriff position, myself, will be going back to the sheriff's office, and I no longer will be the CEO. And with that, there are duties that are part of the UPD Police Department that they do for the sheriff. So those duties will come back to the sheriff's office.
Mayor, you are on that board, but you also have the interest of your city, right, Midvale, in mind as you're going through this process. Talk about the impact this is having on your residents.
Well, I think, both on our residents and our officers, unfortunately, this bill set it up that our officers don't have job stability right now. And what our legislature didn't consider going through this process is the huge public safety impacts that this could have on our community. Luckily, we've got committed partners at the table, the UPD board, the sheriff's office, that we are doing everything we can, putting our heads down, getting to work so we can minimize any of those potential public safety impacts.
Weigh in on that, Sheriff, if you will. As you move forward, what steps do you take and how do you approach that to make sure there is no impact on public safety when it comes to law enforcement?
Well, the way we approach it is the UPD has some experience in agencies leaving the UPD, and we have been able to manage operations day to day, and that's what we want to do, is continue running the operations while these two new entities are starting up. So the new UPD and then taking things back to the sheriff's office with no break in service. Now, there was not a lot of studies done on the impact to the community on public safety and the funding. So we do know that there will be some impacts there. But we're going to do everything we can to ensure that number one is our public safety, us serving our communities. That is what our number one priority is, and then our officers and our civilian employees.
I want to dig into the funding a little bit more in just a second, but first, Mayor, talk a little bit more about what the likelihood is of what law enforcement will look like in your city and the other cities that are impacted by this. Are you envisioning the cities impacted here staying together in kind of a UPD 2 type form, or what is it looking like?
Right, that's a great question. So at this point, every community that is a part of UPD has the goal of continuing to work together. There's still a lot of questions of what that looks like, and what we're about to go through in this reorganizing process is to figure out, without having the sheriff at the table, what does this look like for our communities? And I think every community a part of UPD will be saying, hey, is this still the right fit for us? And for communities who aren't a part of Unified Police right now, hopefully we can create a model that is interesting to all communities throughout the valley who want to come and join this organization. But the goal for me right now is that we need to collect all the information of what does reorganizing look like so we can take that back to our individual councils and they can make the most informed decision possible.
Do you see that being more likely, sticking together, or do you see some cities maybe looking at this opportunity to say, maybe it's time to form our own police department?
I think the goal for most cities is to stick together. Again, I think that we don't know what the sheriff impact not being there, we don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So it's kind of an unknown, but our intent at this point is say, let's see what it looks like to reorganize, and can we all continue to do this by working together? Sheriff,
talk to us about what law enforcement looks like from your perspective once this split is official. We all remember the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office prior to the UPD. Right. Is that what we're looking at?
Similar to that, yes. I want everyone to know that the Unified Police Department provides one of the best outstanding services in law enforcement today. It is going to be tough to match that because under Unified Police Department, there's consolidated services and shared services. that is going to be tough to match because that's where the funding comes in. But what we're looking at is as we bring some of the things back to the sheriff's office is to continue with partnerships and relationships and do everything we can to continue to be as efficient as we can in law enforcement. We've done it before, so we just want to make sure that we get everything covered and, you know, public safety isn't impacted.
What can you tell us as of right now as far as a time frame? What are we looking at?
Well, with the legislation, it gave us till July of 2025. We anticipate we're going to make some changes earlier than that. I spoke to the board at the last governing board meeting and gave the date of 2024, July of 2024 as a possibility that everyone could come together at the table and do it then. But we have not solidified any dates yet. And we don't want to rush into this, but you don't want to take too long either.
You know, we recognize that we need to make this transition as quickly but as responsibly as possible. So we've pushed forward that year timeline, the July 1st, 2025 to July 1st of 2024, so that we can get answers to our officers and to our community as quickly as we can, but making sure that we do that responsibly.
Yeah, I wanted to dig into that a little more because you brought up the nerves, I guess, of officers wondering what's next, what's going to happen. Sheriff, what's your advice to officers who may be on edge at this moment, wondering, will I have a job in a year or not?
What the advice I've given them is to have some patience and, you know, watch what's going on. Law enforcement right now is already challenged in filling all the positions, so I'm confident everyone will have a job. We just don't know what agency they will have that job with. And so we're asking our officers to stick with the UPD until more decisions can be made. Some will come to the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and others will go to the new UPD, but we're pretty confident, you know, that we can work together to save as many jobs as possible, if not all of them.
Mayor, what are the most important steps moving forward over the next year when it concerns your city?
Yeah, so one of the goals that we have is that by July 1st of this year, we're going to set the table. We need to know what are the pieces going to be at the table so we can actually take the year after that to reorganize. So that's really what we're looking at, who's going to be at the table, try to get a better idea of what that looks like, and then take that year to reorganize. And hopefully by July 1st of 2024, this new organization, whatever it looks like, is started, and again, we have answers to our community and our officers.
Sheriff, you brought up funding a little earlier. I want to get into that a little bit more because that's a big question mark here. When you're talking about the county and then potentially cities splitting up from that, what are your major concerns when it comes to funding and what's being done to try to address those?
The major concerns is right now we consolidate services, and some of the consolidation will come back, you know, be separated, and that could create more cost. And that's why we've been pushing for other police departments to understand if you consolidate, our residents get better service at a cheaper rate. And that's what we're going to continue looking at and ensuring that, you know, our residents have the best service possible for a reasonable cost.
And when you talk about cities, you know, staying together or forming their own departments, what are the concerns when you talk about the county being mixed in that with funding as well?
So right now the county, I mean, both there's countywide services such as the statutory dues the county pays for 100% of, but there's also the shared services piece that the county pays for 20% of, and we could lose that 20%. For the remaining UPD communities, the townships and the cities, we have to figure out what does that look like with losing that 20%, and that's where we've got some tough decisions to make as a board.
Sheriff, when we were first starting to talk about this earlier in the year, you had come out and strongly said, I'm opposed to this. I think we should keep it the way it is, but you've been backed into a corner. Talk about that experience, if you will.
Well, the initial bill, the reason I was opposed to it, it was taking law enforcement authority away from the sheriff. And the substitute bill did not do that. So in order to make things work, I did not oppose and I supported the substitute bill because I felt like it was better in the long run. This issue has come up every single year that I have been sheriff and prior to me being sheriff. So I felt like at some point we need to just address the issue head on, and that's what I did.
And Mayor, would you have rather just stick with the current situation?
Yeah, so I stayed opposed to the bill throughout. You know, I've got to say, I do understand where the sheriff came because I agreed the political writing was on the wall. And even before the bill passed, the UPD board agreed that we were going to have to separate out the sheriff. Why I opposed the bill was to say we could do this work internally. This set up a timeline where we were leaving our officers and our communities in limbo. I wanted to take the time internally, come up with a plan, and then announce a separation date. Unfortunately, this legislation didn't allow us to do that.
Okay, I really appreciate both of your insight here. I know there's still a lot of unanswered questions, but we'll be following this closely as the process plays out. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break.